So Chairman Bartlett, thank you for joining us. We have a lot to get to, so let's just dive right in. And first things first, I did read your testimony, and one thing that's clear is that you feel there is a lot of uncertainty with this proposal, good or bad.
Absolutely. I think there are a lot of unknowns, and I think there are, we don't know, for example, what the sale price is going to be, which is going to significantly determine how long it will be before ratepayers see a benefit. We also don't know who the operating firm is going to be, what that structure will look like, and there's just a significant amount of time between now and the takeover where we're going to be in this state of limbo, and I think that creates a certain amount of uncertainty when it comes to the kinds of investments and maintenance of the system that's going to be required.
And when you say operator, that is the entity that is hired by the board to actually undertake the operations of the company, of Pine Tree Power, as it were.
That's right. I think the way to think about this is currently the investor-owned utilities make a profit on the capital investments they make. So think of the poles and the wires and the transformers. Under this new system, the board will hire an operator. That operator is likely to be, though it doesn't have to be, but it's likely to be a for-profit company. And so now the profits move to the operating side. So the management decisions that the company will be making may be a little more centered towards the operating side than the current utilities, which tend to spend more on poles and wires and things because that's where they make money.
Does that give the PUC pause at all?
Well, I think how you regulate it, the entity will change a little bit. Right now, we carefully scrutinize for the capital investments that the utility wants to make sure they're not gold plating, over-investing in the infrastructure. If you're dealing with a for-profit management company, you're certainly going to want to make sure that they have good incentives to provide service, and you want to make sure that they are making the proper balance between the capital investments and operating solutions to problems that arise.
And as it's written, the PUC would actually oversee the selection of that operator, correct?
Yeah, we would review the contract that the board would prepare.
And what would you be looking for in a contract and an entity that the PUC would feel comfortable putting in charge of those crucial operations?
Well, first and foremost, we're going to look to the statutory language and make sure that the operator is complying with the contract complies with the requirements of the statute. We certainly would give considerable weight to the board preference. This is an elected board that would have selected this operator, so there's a certain amount of deference that will be given. And we're going to look to make sure that ratepayers are protected, that there's a right balancing of sort of the risks and the profit potential for that company so that ratepayers aren't taking an unreasonable risk when that contract is signed.
It seems that the time frame is an issue with the creation of this company. Litigation is very, very possible in terms of the two utility parent companies not agreeing to a sale price and now entering into litigation to move the process forward. And so with all those delays and litigation costs, how soon are ratepayers really going to see a break, if at all?
So we did, the legislature had us do an analysis of a prior proposal. It's not the specific proposal, but a prior proposal to create a consumer-owned utility.
Yeah.
And what that found is that in the early years, you're likely to see higher costs than you otherwise would because of the acquisition costs and the transition period. But then over time, in the future, you'll start to see savings. I think it's important to understand that because of the timeframes in the statute and the likely litigation, you're looking at somewhere between 5 and 10 years probably after Election Day before you'd actually see a takeover for the new entity. And then there'd be some period of time after that where you're sort of paying down that initial debt before you start to see savings in the future.
So there's quite an expanse before consumers would sort of see a benefit.
It's a real trade-off between sort of the short term and then the long term. Over the long term, there could be very substantial savings as the entity makes significant capital investments. But in the short to medium term, I think there's a lot of uncertainty as to how much costs could potentially go up as a result of making this acquisition.
And so in closing, it's really just a matter of what are voters comfortable with, what sacrifices are they willing to make, and what's important to them.
I agree. It's important to understand that there are risks either way, either keeping with our current system or going to a new one. And there's real trade-offs between the short and the longer term that I think people should be taking into account.
All right. Well, we thank you so much for your time and your insight here.
Glad to be here.